The message landed in my inbox at exactly 8:03 in the morning, on Mother's Day of all days. I braced myself for another one of her usual guilt trips. Instead, there was a file attached, a formal-looking bill. The number at the top read $347,000. Below it was a line that made my blood run cold. This is what it cost to raise someone who turned out to be a disappointment. Since you can't be bothered to show gratitude for everything I gave up for you, I expect to be paid back. Then I saw it. She had CC'd 48 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, old family friends, practically everyone we knew. I sat there frozen, just staring at my screen. Then I went digging through an old photo box, pulled out a single picture, and forwarded it right back to everyone on that list. By the next morning, the whole family was buzzing. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 32, and 3 years back I started a small bakery that now sends desserts to 6 different restaurants around Chicago. In my mother's eyes, none of that mattered. It still made me a disappointment. Not because the business was failing, not because I was jobless, not because I leaned on anyone for support. I was a disappointment simply because I hadn't turned into the person she'd pictured. My older brother Ethan became a corporate lawyer, and his diplomas lined an entire wall of her dining room. My achievements never even made it onto her fridge. Growing up, I heard variations of, "Why can't you be like your brother?" more times than I can count. At first, I assumed she meant it as encouragement. Eventually, I understood she truly believed it. Even so, I spent years chasing her approval, showing up to every gathering, calling weekly, sending gifts, helping whenever she asked. It was never enough. When I quit my accounting career at 28 to open a bakery, she reacted like I'd told her I was running off to join a traveling circus. She spent months warning relatives that I was ruining my future. Funny enough, I made it work anyway. It wasn't quick or painless, but I built something real. A business, a home, a life I could be proud of. None of that changed her mind. Mother's Day rolled around on a clear Sunday. I got up early, arranged some flowers, and picked up her favorite tea. At 8:03, my phone buzzed with an email from her, and I smiled. That smile lasted about 3 seconds. The subject line said, "Balance owed." Puzzled, I clicked it open, and there was a polished invoice. At the very top, an amount due of $347,000. My first thought was that it had to be a prank. Then I kept reading. Groceries, school supplies, doctor's appointments, birthday parties, coats, summer camp, even utility bills, every dollar she'd ever spent on me since I was born, and all tallied up. At the bottom, she'd written that this was the price of raising a disappointment, and that since I refused to appreciate her sacrifices, she expected repayment. My stomach turned. Then I noticed the CC list, 48 names deep. Every relative, every family friend. This wasn't a private jab. She'd turned it into a public spectacle. My phone started buzzing nonstop with people asking if it was real, sending awkward messages, or saying nothing at all. I sat at my table staring at the screen, and for once, I wasn't furious. I was just exhausted. Tired of defending myself, tired of proving my worth, tired of chasing approval that would never come. I shut the laptop and walked into my storage room. She wanted an audience. Well, now she had one. The real question was whether she was ready for what came next. I spent the next hour digging through boxes, old drawings, yearbooks, birthday cards, family photos, remnants of a life she apparently viewed as a bad investment. Then I came across an old photo album, and one picture slipped out onto the floor. The second I saw it, I went still. I remembered the exact moment it was taken, and more than that, I remembered what had happened right before the shutter clicked. Nobody in the family talked about that day anymore, not because it didn't matter, but because it was inconvenient. The photo showed my grandmother, my mother, and me standing outside an old bank. To anyone else, it looked like a normal snapshot. To me, it explained everything. Memories started flooding back. Conversations, promises, paperwork. Things my grandmother had once told me to never forget. I went through the rest of the album and found more pieces of the story. By noon, my hands had stopped shaking. The embarrassment was gone. Even the anger had faded. I actually smiled, not because she'd hurt me, but because she'd just handed me the key to the truth. I scanned the photo, opened my email, selected all 48 names she'd copied, attached the image, and typed a single line. Since we're bringing up family history today, everyone might want to see this. Then I hit send. I figured there'd be silence, maybe a couple of confused replies. Instead, my phone practically caught fire. Within 15 minutes, the family group chat had over 80 messages, questions, arguments, people tagging one another, demanding context. The photo had done exactly what I hoped. It jogged everyone's memory. My mother replied first. "This picture doesn't prove anything," she wrote. Then another message, "Emma is just trying to change the subject." Then a third, "Don't feed into this." That's when Aunt Rebecca chimed in. Actually, I remember that day clearly. The chat went silent for a beat. Then Uncle David added, "So do I." My mother stopped responding. I watched from my kitchen table as the years of carefully curated family history began to unravel. Eventually, someone asked the obvious question, "What are we even looking at?" I took a breath and explained, "This was taken the day Grandma helped cover my college tuition." My mother shot back instantly, "That's not true," but the reply came too quickly, too defensively, and people noticed. I looked at the photo again, 3 smiling women in front of a bank. To most people, it was just a family photo. To me, it was a memory. I was 19, my dad had just lost his job, money was tight, and I'd gotten into 2 great schools with no clear way to pay for either. My mother spent months telling everyone how much she was sacrificing to fund my education. She loved telling that story. What she left out was what happened the week before tuition was due. I remembered sitting in my grandmother's living room in tears, convinced I'd have to give up my spot. Grandma listened without saying much, then disappeared into her room and came back with a folder full of savings bonds she'd been building for decades, money meant for emergencies. She looked at me and said something I've never forgotten. An education is never wasted money. 3 days later, she brought me to that same bank, the one in the photo, and withdrew enough to cover nearly my entire first year. I shared that whole story in the group chat. Aunt Rebecca added that Grandma had actually helped more than once. Another relative said they remembered hearing the same thing. Then another, and another, memory after memory piling up. My mother tried to push back, insisting everyone was misremembering, that she'd sacrificed more than anyone gave her credit for. Nobody said she hadn't contributed, but people were starting to question whether she deserved sole credit. Then my cousin Melissa posted a scanned thank you card my grandmother had written nearly 12 years earlier, thanking Melissa for helping organize a fundraiser for my education. The date and Grandma's signature were right there. The chat turned chaotic after that. People digging through old emails, photos, and records, comparing notes with relatives they barely spoke to anymore. Every new detail chipped away at my mother's version of events. For years, she'd claimed she carried the whole burden alone. Now it was clear plenty of people had pitched in, especially Grandma. By evening, the conversation still hadn't slowed down. Nearly the entire family had seen the photo and was asking questions. What surprised me most wasn't that people believed me, it was that they were finally willing to look closer. My mother grew more frustrated as the night went on, her replies getting shorter and more emotional with every new detail that surfaced. The certainty she'd walked in with that morning was fading fast. Around 9 that night, a new message popped up from my grandmother herself. She's 91 and barely uses her phone, but everyone respects her deeply. The whole chat went quiet the second her name appeared. Her message was short. "Tomorrow evening, anyone who wants the truth is welcome at my house." Then a second line followed. "There are things this family should have talked about a long time ago." I knew right then that everything was about to shift. The next evening, Grandma's house was busier than I'd seen it in years. Cars lined up along the street, relatives packed into the living room, dining room, even the kitchen, with a few joining by video call. Everyone showed up wanting answers. My mother arrived 20 minutes late, walking in with her head held high and her face carefully composed, but for the first time ever, I could tell she was nervous. Grandma was already seated at the head of the table. At 91, she moved slower than she used to, but the moment she spoke, the whole room went quiet. I didn't gather everyone here to embarrass anybody, she said. I called this because this family deserves honesty. Nobody said a word. She pulled a large cardboard box up beside her chair and opened it. Folders, envelopes, letters, records going back decades. She pulled out the first folder and said simply, I kept everything. A few people laughed quietly. That was so like her. She'd always documented everything: birthdays, loans between family members, graduation gifts, holiday spending. Nothing ever slipped through the cracks. For close to 2 hours, she walked the room through the paperwork, not to point fingers, just to lay out the facts. The records showed exactly who had funded my education. Grandma covered a large share. Several relatives chipped in. A family fundraiser added more. Scholarships filled the rest. My mother had contributed too, just far less than she'd spent years claiming. The room grew quieter with each page turned. Finally, Grandma pulled out one last envelope. My handwritten letter to her. The thank you note I'd written after my first semester. She passed it to Uncle David, who read it out loud. I'd written about how grateful I was that she believed in me when I feared my future was falling apart. By the time he finished, several people were wiping their eyes. Then Grandma turned to my mother and said gently, You did help your daughter, but somewhere along the way, you turned that help into a debt she owed you. My mother just stared at the table. No comeback, no explanation, nothing but silence. Then something happened I never saw coming. My father spoke up. He'd stayed out of every family conflict for years, but this time, he looked at my mother and said quietly, We should have been proud of her. The room went completely still. He turned to face me. We missed your graduation, his voice breaking. We missed your wedding. I could barely swallow. We missed years of your life because we chose to listen to one side instead of asking for yours. It was the first time in 5 years I'd seen real regret in his eyes. Several relatives apologized to me afterward, not for the email itself, but for accepting one version of events without ever asking for mine. My mother didn't apologize that night. She left early by herself. 2 weeks later, another email showed up from her. My heart pounded when I saw her name. I opened it slowly. No invoice this time, no accusations, no due audience copied in, just 3 words. I was wrong. Nothing else. The truth didn't undo the pain. It didn't hand back the graduations they skipped or the wedding photos they weren't in. But it gave me something more valuable, the freedom to stop proving myself. Because the real failure was never the daughter who built a life for herself despite the criticism. It was the belief that love could ever be tallied up like an invoice. And once the truth finally came out, everyone understood the difference. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.